Hello everyone. Today, I want to share an emotional story about James, a talented young CEO, and Diep, his strong and loyal girlfriend who stands by his side. When James and Diep are betrayed by John, a close friend, and his father who plot to take over the family company, everything seems to collapse. But unexpectedly, James's father returns from abroad, using his experience and connections to help his son and Diep turn the tables and defeat their enemies. This story is not just about a battle for power, but a powerful testament to the strength of love and family. If you enjoy thrilling and heartfelt stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to catch the upcoming videos. Thank you all so much. It was a quiet autumn afternoon in the capital of a European country. The golden sunlight bathed the rooftops, and rows of trees bowed gently in the wind. On the top floor of a five-star hotel, James's father was wrapping up a meeting with international investors. A man in his 60s, his hair already graying, yet his presence remained sharp, composed, and formidable. In the world of finance, his name carried the weight of legends, a master strategist, a man who never allowed emotion to interfere with judgment. But that afternoon, a short message changed everything. His assistant entered, face pale. "Sir, you need to see this." He didn't speak. His eyes turned to the tablet placed before him. Headlines flashed one after another, filled with names too familiar to ignore. CEO James accused of embezzlement, Diep, alleged puppet master behind Skybridge, whistleblower identified as John, longtime friend of James. Every line struck him like a blade. John, someone he once considered a son, someone who had dined in their family home, called him uncle with apparent sincerity. And now, that same person had teamed up with his own father, an infamous, ruthless businessman, to destroy James and seize the very company his son had poured heart and soul into building. James's father said nothing. He slowly set the tablet down and turned to look out the window. The sun still shone brightly, as if the world hadn't shifted. But inside him, a fire had already started to burn. Not a blaze of rage, but a cold, steady fire. The kind that only exists in those who've been to war and walked out the other side stronger. "Cancel everything. Prepare the jet," he said quietly, not looking at anyone. But his voice carried the weight of command. "But sir, what about the meetings with Austria and the Dalen Group? They don't matter now. I have something far more important." The overnight flight was silent. No press releases, no public statements. No one even knew he was on his way home. Alone in the dimly lit cabin, he sat still as the screen in front of him replayed the same footage again and again. James and Diep, surrounded by reporters, their faces stoic but their eyes unmistakably weary. His son, once a small boy clinging to his leg, was now being torn apart in front of the world. And Diep, the girl he once viewed with suspicion, was the only one still standing beside him. He remembered the first time James introduced Diep. She hadn't smiled to please him, hadn't tried to charm. She had simply looked him straight in the eye and said, "I love James." Not for money. Not for power. Just for who he is. He hadn't believed her then. But now, when everyone else had turned away, she remained by James's side. At the airport, a black car awaited him. No lights inside. He didn't go to the family estate, nor to any luxury hotel. He went straight to a familiar penthouse, the former nerve center of his own empire. The gears were already turning. Old contacts. Old favors. Old secrets. Everything was about to be set in motion. This return wasn't about spectacle. It wasn't about reclaiming power or pride. It was the return of a father, a strategist, and a predator, when his own blood had been wounded. News of James's father's return never appeared in any headlines. No journalists caught him at the airport, and no official confirmed his presence back in the country. But within the elite circles of finance, those who had once crossed paths with him could feel a subtle shift in the air. They knew, when he came back, someone was going to pay. While James was suspended from his position, with his personal accounts frozen and shareholders beginning to lean toward John, the so-called hero who exposed corruption, Diep became the target of vicious attacks online. She was labeled the shadow behind the throne, surrounded by rumors and slander. Everything happened too fast, too smoothly, as if it had all been planned in advance. But what John hadn't calculated was that James was not alone. From an old penthouse nestled in the heart of the city, James's father launched a silent but ruthless counterattack. He made no public appearances, released no statements, and called no press conferences. Yet day by day, cracks began to appear in John's meticulously crafted scheme. A covert investigation team, personally assembled by James's father, started tracing suspicious transactions, from offshore shell companies to shady dealings involving John's father. Private meetings took place in quiet corners. Former stakeholders, some moved by respect, others afraid of the name that once brought empires to their knees with a single handshake, were approached again. Old relationships, thought to have gone dormant over the past decade, were awakened. He didn't need threats or theatrics, just a look, a call, and the balance of power began to tilt. Meanwhile, Diep, with steel in her spine and a brilliant mind, never backed down. Under the silent protection of James's father, she filed a formal complaint against the flawed internal investigation and publicly released an audio recording of John speaking with a major shareholder. In the recording, John casually mentioned splitting profits once their plan to restructure the company succeeded. The clip spread like wildfire across boardrooms, and for the first time, the righteous mask John wore began to crack. And then came the decisive blow. At an emergency shareholder meeting organized by James's father himself, he walked into the room in a charcoal gray suit, eyes sharp as ice, carrying the calm of a general heading into battle. Many present had never met him in person, but the moment he spoke, the entire room fell silent. 30 years ago, I faced men who tried to steal my family's company. I defended it, rebuilt it, and passed it on to my son. Today, I've returned, not for power, but to confront betrayal. He handed a thick stack of documents to his legal team. Evidence, certified, backed by bank records, video footage, and witness statements, clearly showing collusion between John and his father to sell the company's core technology to a foreign competitor. In that moment, John's face turned pale. Those who once stood by him were frozen in place. There was no escape. No plan B. He had played a bold game, but he had underestimated the master player returning to the board. The next day, John was summoned by authorities. His father was placed under investigation for money laundering and illegal transfer of intellectual property abroad. Skybridge's stock rebounded sharply, soaring after hitting rock bottom. James, though he remained silent, was reinstated amid thunderous applause from those who had once doubted him. But only James and Diep truly understood, this wasn't a victory of wealth or reputation. It was a victory of trust, when a once distant father stood by their side, with all the strength he had. The storm had passed, but the wounds remained. James stood by the glass wall on the top floor of the company headquarters, sunlight from the late afternoon spilling quietly into the room. Below was the bustling city, but inside him, there was only stillness, the kind that follows a violent whirlwind. After days of being pushed into a corner, facing suspicion and unanswered questions, James had reclaimed his position, his dignity, and his voice. But what touched him most wasn't the victory itself, it was the return of his father, the man he had long believed would never truly stand by his side. That evening, James and Diep returned to the old family villa, the place where he had grown up, where his father had spent lonely years after withdrawing from the business world. The rusted wooden gate creaked open softly, and there he was, sitting in the garden, hands pouring tea, eyes gazing calmly at the sky as if nothing had happened. "Dad," James spoke, slowly. He looked up, his eyes deep, but no longer stern or distant. He nodded gently and motioned for them to sit. Diep, composed as ever, quietly placed her hand over James's, a silent gesture of reassurance. "You did well," his father said, his voice deeper, warmer than ever. "But being good isn't enough. In this world, trust and the people beside you are what keep you from falling." James was stunned. Never once in his life had his father openly praised him. Never spoken words like those. "I didn't trust Diep because I was afraid she'd take advantage of you, afraid love would make you weak. But I was wrong. She didn't weaken you, she made you stronger." Diep bowed her head, her eyes glistening. It was the first time she heard James's father, notorious for his coldness, acknowledge her not just as the CEO's girlfriend, but as someone who truly belonged in their family. That night's dinner was simple, just the three of them, a few home-cooked dishes. No wine, no celebration, no guests. But for James and Diep, it was the most precious moment. They were no longer fighters in a power game, they were a family, a fortress no enemy could breach. Before leaving the table, his father stood up and spoke slowly. Today, I'm handing back to you not just the company, but the trust of a lifetime. And remember, Diep is not just someone who stood by you in hardship. She's the one you must protect for life. James gently squeezed Diep's hand. She looked at him and smiled, not the tired smile of days past, but one lit by the promise of a new beginning. Outside, the sky darkened. But inside that home, warm lights glowed brightly. And in the hearts of the three, and once distant father, a wounded son, and a woman once doubted, there was only trust, love, and deep gratitude. Because in the end, when reputation crumbles, wealth disappears, and enemies reveal themselves, only family remains as the unshakable fortress.